Hey, welcome back to my channel. I recently saw a video from Radiant Brit about channels that hate on Shanann Watts, and you can go watch that video. It's pretty good, but I wanted to specifically talk about a video by a creator named Roxanne, and how it's very uninformed, very speculative, and why that's such a bad thing. So, this woman, Roxanne, made a video on why Shanann Watts, who was unalived by her husband, Chris Watts, and her two children were also unalived by him, and she was also pregnant at the time, how she is a narcissist, and how basically Chris was at his wit's end, so of course this was going to happen. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this. First off, Roxanne says she's not victim blaming, but she's also explaining why Chris would do this, and is saying that because Shanann was abusive, that of course he was going to do this. And she's talking about the dangers of abusive relationships. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, Shanann Watts posted a lot on Facebook, yada, 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 so we know a lot about her and her life. We don't know a lot about her and her life. Just like you don't know a lot about me. My dog George is barking. You don't know a lot about me and my life, or any YouTuber really. We can speculate, we can make assumptions from what we see, but to call somebody an abusive narcissist without any concrete proof, just saying, oh, she announced she was pregnant on a live stream and he didn't know how to react.
However, we know of at least one occasion that was not comfortable for Chris, and that's when Shanann announces to him that she's pregnant on Facebook Live. Now, regardless of how he feels about this pregnancy, this unplanned pregnancy, by the way, regardless of how he feels, he has to give a positive response, because he can't let the Facebook Live audience know that maybe he isn't comfortable with this pregnancy, or that there's trouble in paradise. And later on, we find out that Chris expresses to Shanann that he was not comfortable with the pregnancy, that Bella and Celeste were enough, and he was not ready for the stress of a third child. But in that moment, and this is news to him, he's finding out for the first time about this pregnancy, and he can't give an honest reaction about the issue because he's being live streamed on social media and the world is watching. Now, that's a very significant and private moment that he had no say in how that went. He's finding out his own wife is pregnant at the same time the rest of the world on social media is finding out she's pregnant.
If that kind of behavior is enough to get you to annihilate your entire family, you really need some serious help and not just therapy, because that is not okay. That is dangerous. That is disgusting. He had two children and a wife, and even if he wanted to not be with his wife, then divorce her like a normal human being. But could he do that? No. Then Roxanne goes on to talk about how the mother-in-law gave the two kids, Bella and Celeste, ice cream and how one of the kids has a severe allergy. So Shanann got mad about that. Anybody who has a severe allergy or has people in their lives with severe allergies would probably think that's an understandable thing to flip out about, because allergies can kill you.
An argument where Cindy Watts basically ends up kicking Shanann out of their house. Now, some might argue that Cindy Watts should have known better than to get ice cream that Celeste was allergic to. True, maybe, but I can easily see that as an honest misunderstanding. I really don't think it's a case that Shanann describes that Cindy Watts is trying to kill Celeste.
This is coming from Cindy, that TC had a food allergy, and Shanann came into the living room and was just yelling at Cindy, telling her she's trying to kill her baby or something like that because of the food allergy, and Cindy claimed she had no idea about it.
Think about it. Do you really think a grandmother would deliberately try to kill their own grandchild by giving them food allergies? I think it's a thing where she doesn't understand food allergies and that they can be deadly. Maybe in her family, nobody has food allergies. Maybe she doesn't understand what anaphylactic shock is. But I really doubt that Cindy Watts was deliberately trying to kill her own granddaughter. I think it was an honest mistake, but Shanann, who has a very strong and confrontational personality, let it get under her skin, and this resulted in an argument so intense it led Cindy Watts to kicking Shanann out of her house.
She is the mother of these children, so of course she's gonna be mad when somebody charged with the care of her children does something so reckless. And to say that nobody's ever done that on purpose, I have seen cases where a grandparent does do this to a child, specifically a child with a coconut allergy. The grandmother didn't believe it, so she put coconut oil in this child's hair, and the child unfortunately passed away. And I'm not saying that's what Shanann's mother-in-law, Cindy Watts, what she was intending, but it doesn't matter what she was intending. That kind of behavior can kill a child. So guess what? An oopsie little mistake like that is not an oopsie little mistake. I would hope if Roxanne has anybody in her life with a severe allergy, or if she herself has a severe allergy, she would understand this, but it doesn't seem like she does. Sorry, my dogs are getting groomed out in the driveway, so I was just making sure the groomer wasn't coming in. That would be a very awkward moment, but So yeah, another thing she did was she talked about how Shanann exploited her children on Facebook Live. And I've talked ad nauseum about how family vlogging is exploitative in my opinion. However, this entire family was annihilated by Chris Watts. So I don't really give a shit what happened before then. I really don't. I just don't understand the hold this man seems to have on people, especially a lot of women, and how they will go to such great lengths to defend this man who unalived his 2 children. How could you do that? And then how could you defend that? I have a lot of problems with Roxanne's video because I really don't get it. First of all, I don't know what Roxanne's credentials are, and even if she does have any, she's not in a professional capacity on YouTube. I think we should leave this kind of discourse to the professionals actually working the case. And when I say professionals, I don't mean armchair detectives on YouTube or armchair psychologists on YouTube, or even if they're real psychologists on YouTube. I really believe we should leave this kind of speculation and discourse that causes more harm than good to the actual professionals. Because, so here's the thing, most people, if their partner is genuinely pitting them against their family, which, by the way, I don't believe that's the case here, because again, the food allergy and Chris's mother was careless in this situation. So I do agree that any good parent would kind of be like, if you're gonna do this, you can't be around your grandchildren anymore because you're putting the child's life in danger. But if he was really upset by that, get a divorce, dude. And I know people say, well, Shanann said when they got a divorce, he would never see the kids again. Get a divorce. If you murder your children, you're also never gonna see them again. So, I don't know what kind of logic anybody who uses this defense is using, because it's no logic that I can wrap my head around. Maybe I'm just dumb, but I don't know.
So here we see another instance where Shanann is making decisions about their lives that Chris isn't comfortable with. Also, the tensions between Shanann and Chris's family had been brewing from such an early point in their relationship that Chris mentions in the interrogation interview that his family didn't even attend their wedding.
I mean, it happened at the wedding. Like, that's the reason they didn't come to the wedding.
And it was because his parents didn't go to their wedding.
So did his parents not like her?
No, they do not like her. Yeah, they do not like her. His parents do not.
So this is no longer a situation where you could say that Shanann was just a sweet person and the only person who harbored resentment towards her was Chris, because he was abusive and a covert narcissist. Chris's entire family did not like Shanann, so it does say something about her personality that she had perhaps a tendency in how domineering she was to rub people the wrong way.
Did his parents not like her?
No, they do not like her. Yeah, they do not like her. His parents do not.
This is a reoccurring theme that I've seen throughout features on this family, where Shanann's personality, it even seems people are making excuses for how dominant she is.
She can be bossy, but in a good way. I mean, it's not like I've teased her because I'm like, you're so bossy, but she's trying to like push you to do good things and like motivate you. It's not like a...
Firstly, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation's agent Tammy Lee, who administered the polygraph test to Chris Watts, said that after she watched a lot of Shanann's social media posts, she got a sense of Shanann's personality.
So part of the investigation, I needed to know who Shanann was, and so I started looking at her Facebook page. I can kind of appreciate her attitude, I guess, sometimes. I come from a long line of Italian women, so we're very strong, sassy, assertive, and that's how I pictured Shanann.
Lee said that she herself came from a long line of Italian women and, quote, "We're very strong, sassy, assertive, and that's how I pictured Shanann." Now listen, I know this vocabulary very well, and a lot of black women use this to describe themselves. They say, well, I'm sassy, I'm strong, I'm assertive. People, this is classic code word for someone who has an attitude and a quick temper. They're domineering, maybe even overbearing, maybe even a bit of a bully.
And by the way, Roxanne uses a lot of sexist arguments against Shanann and how she was this domineering woman who was bossy and made all the choices in the marriage. And I know that Shanann has made comments like, oh yeah, I do things, and Chris just goes along with it. we don't know the ins and outs of their marriage. We do not know that. Just because Shanann makes this statement in passing, which she probably meant as a joke, but of course I don't even know that because I don't know any of these people. Does Roxanne know any of these people? No. I just don't understand how when women make decisions, somehow that drives a man to murder them. And I don't understand how Roxanne can sit on her channel and say that and think it's okay. There is an epidemic in the world of femicide. Look it up. I follow this one man on Instagram whose sister died at the hands of her partner. I'm going to look him up quick so I can get his name. But his name is Harang Hala, and his sister's name was Nikki, and she was murdered by her partner. But Harang he's a very good resource. He always puts out a lot on Instagram that makes me think, and he's a big advocate against domestic violence and against misogyny, which is clearly a big problem in this world because we see time and time again cases like this happening, and it shouldn't. And I'm not saying men are never victims of domestic abuse. Of course, I would never say that, but I will say whenever there's a case where a woman was clearly killed by their partner, a lot of times people will make so many excuses for their partners and be like, oh, well, she shouldn't have done this, she shouldn't have done that. Chris, you shouldn't have fucking killed your wife and children, bud. I don't know what to tell you. I hope you rot in hell.
Shanann says, referring to Chris, I did belittle him without realizing it with his parents. Told him he needed to find his balls and protect his family. So here Shanann is admitting to an emotionally abusive behavior. She belittled him. And this is one of the worst ways you can belittle a man. She's essentially emasculating him, saying he needs some balls and basically he should take her side when it comes to the conflict between herself and his side of the family. Now this is a very difficult position she's putting Chris in. She's basically pitting him against his own family. She feels like they're being unfair to her. They feel like she's being unfair to them. Chris is caught in the middle and she's saying, grow some balls and take my side. I'm your wife, so I should be your first priority.
Roxanne said Shanann emasculated Chris by saying he needs to grow some balls. Now, I don't like to use that phrase, especially not to my friends that are men and partners I date that are men, because I don't want to contribute to the mindset that men need to be a certain way to be a real man. But to use this in a video about how Shanann Watts, a woman who was unalived by her husband, who also, by the way, cheated on her, let's not forget that. To use that in a video like that is tasteless, because I'm sure Shanann was imperfect. From what I've seen, Shanann was imperfect. Nobody I know has claimed Shanann was perfect. But we need to dismantle this idea that there's a perfect victim and they're the only ones who deserve justice and they're the only ones who deserve empathy and sympathy. Newsflash, there is no such thing as a perfect victim. Especially adults, we all do fucked up things because we're all fucked up people. Especially if we're in a situation with somebody like Chris, who probably behind closed doors might have not been the way he was to everybody else. But of course, this again is just speculation, and I'm being a hypocrite right now. But my point being, there's no perfect victim, and until we can get rid of this idea that there's a perfect victim and anybody else, well, she shouldn't have acted like that. That person shouldn't have done that. If they hadn't, they wouldn't have been in this situation. No. This is the same rhetoric like, what was she wearing? How much did she have to drink? She was leading him on, so of course he would overpower her and assault her. This kind of rhetoric is dangerous, and not just in the case of Shanann Watts, but it's dangerous to people everywhere who didn't deserve what happened to them. It doesn't matter what she did. He was in the wrong 100%. There was not 1% where, well, I'm not saying she was never wrong, but there's not 1% where she was responsible for her death and the death of her children. And again, if you feel like you can't be yourself around your partner, find another partner. Don't murder them. Don't do it. There was no excuse for what Chris Watts did. Not even that, oh, I couldn't be myself around her, feel bad for me. I annihilated my entire family because my feelings were hurt. And I didn't feel like a man. Oh, boo-hoo. And by the way, I'm not trying to be funny here. This is the logic people use when they defend Chris Watts. And that's how ridiculous it is. I don't care if you felt you couldn't be yourself. You murdered your children. Who cares about your feelings? Who gives a flying fuck?
Chris mentions in an interrogation interview that he felt he just couldn't be himself around Shanann.
Why are you falling out of love? After the last 5 weeks, like being by myself and being able to be myself again, I couldn't be myself around Shanann anymore. Why not? It was like I was walking just like walk on eggshells type thing. It's kind of like you feel like you're always doing something that's wrong.
And this is a big point. It's a big indicator of when you're in a toxic relationship. This person does not allow you to express your true emotions, or does not provide or facilitate an atmosphere in which you feel it is safe to express your true emotions. And as a result, you don't feel comfortable or safe enough to be yourself. Because should you be yourself, should you express the way you really feel, there'll be some dire consequences.
So Roxanne is saying he was in a toxic relationship with Shanann because in an interrogation, Chris said he couldn't be himself around Shanann. Roxanne, I don't know if you know this, but when somebody is accused of a horrific crime that they actually committed, by the way, because he did commit this horrific crime, they're gonna say whatever they can to justify it. And that's what Chris is doing here. Of course, he's going to paint Shanann as this terrible person and be like, oh, if she just didn't do this, maybe I wouldn't have had to kill her. And Roxanne is buying that. She's biting on his bait, hook, line, and sinker. I think I got that metaphor totally wrong. I don't claim to know metaphors, but she's falling for this narrative that Chris wants people to buy so that he doesn't look like this terrible monster that he actually is, because he actually destroyed his entire family. And those children don't get to grow up because of his actions. Those children that allegedly begged him to please stop, and he kept doing that. And that is just inexcusable and disgusting. Nothing Shanann did justifies that. I don't care if she was a family vlogger, if she always had a camera in his face and it made him uncomfortable. Get a divorce, dude. And now Roxanne, not only was she misogynistic throughout this whole video, but she's giving into this savior trope that since Shanann had lupus and Chris loved her anyway, that whoa, he swooped in. And I do realize Shanann also spread this narrative, but that's not even the point here, because in this case Roxanne is using this as evidence that Shanann was toxic and took advantage of this poor man that just could not defend himself, which is BS. It's a bunch of BS.
Because you'll notice when Shanann talks about Chris in her live stream, she's gushing about Chris.
He's the best thing that has ever happened to me. Chris and I think, have an amazing relationship. We get each other. He's very sweet. He's very calm. I'm the high-strung one in the relationship.
How wonderful he is, how he's the best thing to happen to her. So clearly she feels comfortable in the relationship. She feels she can be her authentic self and still be loved unconditionally. Because remember, she said she felt that because of all her health problems, Chris wouldn't love her and maybe no one would. But there was Chris when she was at her worst and he still loved her.
He only knew me at that time. He knew me at my worst, and he accepted me. And you know, through your vows, like through sickness and everything, he's been there. He was the one that let me lay on him and fall asleep for 3.5 hours on his lap while he had to pee. He is the best thing that has ever happened to me.
So Shanann certainly felt that she was able to be at her best and at her worst and still be loved unconditionally. But it's clear Chris did not feel the same way, that he couldn't be his authentic self. And
I think what's really harmful is Roxanne is using a lot of language that makes her sound like she knows what she's talking about. Like the word narcissist, which is a clinical diagnosis, and then she's talking about these signs of a toxic relationship. And I'm not saying you have to be an expert to talk about toxic relationships. I've done that on my channel, but the difference is I'm not conjuring up this idea of I'm never claiming to be like, oh, they probably said this, they probably said that. And that is what Roxanne is doing. And this is a lot like, this reminds me a lot of Dr. Todd Grande, and how he'll very much come up with these scenarios and like, oh, this happened and that's why this person snapped. When in reality, that's a very harmful thing to do, especially publicly. If you want to do that around with your friends, do that. I mean, that's pretty bizarre, but you do you. But if you're going to be here on YouTube making these claims about people that cannot defend themselves, you better really have evidence to back this up, because Roxanne has not shown any. She's just shown the clips that we've all seen from Shanann's Facebook Lives and the clips from the wedding video, which if you watched the Netflix documentary, you've seen. So yeah, she's not showing anything we haven't seen before, and she can't because she doesn't have it, because she was not involved with any of these people. So she's just taking what we've all seen and spinning it in a different way to be, and I don't know what her motivation is, but this feels very much like, oh, I have a hot take, so I'm gonna get more views if I say this because all these other dumbasses have bought the lies that the media wanted us to believe. I'm not saying that's her motivation. I myself am speculating here again, being a hypocrite, but at least Roxanne is here to defend herself. So Roxanne, if you would like to go ahead, you can, because luckily you haven't suffered the same fate as Shanann Watts and Bella and Celeste.
Yes, Shanann Watts was a narcissist. No, that did not justify Chris Watts strangling her to death.
And I just want to say that adding a disclaimer that you're not victim blaming and then proceeding to victim blame and say, well, she was toxic and that's why he snapped, that does not negate your victim blaming rhetoric. And that's a PSA in general, but especially for this video by Roxanne. Because just because you say, oh, I do not intend to victim blame, but then if you then use rhetoric that is victim blaming, you're still victim blaming. Yes, I'm mad about this. I know I don't tend to get angry on my channel a lot, but this to me is just beyond. There's no reason for this video. There's no reason for Roxanne to sit on her channel and speculate years after this crime was committed. She's not helping solve the crime. She's not spreading awareness, because there has been tons of awareness on this case. There was a Netflix documentary. It was all over the news. You could not go anywhere on the internet in 2018 and even 2019 without seeing something about this case. And I'm not saying that shouldn't have been the case, but I am saying this case doesn't need more awareness, especially when it's awareness like that that's speculating and throwing out fun little theories and being like, oh, see, this is the real issue and this is what the actual experts got wrong. And I'm not saying that experts are always right, especially in the field of criminal justice. A lot of times the experts are wrong. But in this case, until I see evidence to the contrary, I'm gonna err on the side of believing that Shanann Watts was a victim, because she's not here to defend herself. Chris Watts is, and he's getting tons of love letters in jail from women like Roxanne. And I'm not saying Roxanne sent him any love letters, but lots of women are. So by spreading this hateful rhetoric about Shanann, a woman that died at the hands of her husband, Roxanne's feeding that fire. And we don't need that fire to be fed. And I think that's the end of this video. If you learned something, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you have not already and you would like to see more of my content, please hit that subscribe button down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't send hate to Roxanne. Please don't write anything hateful about Shanann under this video. I know a lot of my followers like me were against MLMs and against family vlogging, but this woman isn't here to defend herself, and she was a victim of a horrific crime. So yeah, bye.